Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt. As many of you who have listened to this show know, I am fascinated with the concept that thoughts can affect matter. It used to be a belief, but now I feel it to be an inevitable reality. As one who feels the Buddhist concept of interconnectedness to be true, it only makes sense that as everything is connected with their seemingly cohesive boundaries being our mere mental projections, so are the connections of the internal and the external, of thought and manifestation, of intention and action. So when I came across Cynthia Sue Larson's work having to do with quantum leaping, a practice that involves meditation, visualization, and manifestation as a way of co-collaborating with reality in order to affect events towards the best outcome for everyone, I was all ears. The foundation of her ideas are based in quantum physics, and she applies them to consciousness and reality shifting. It's such compelling stuff that I was really excited to get a chance to talk with her about it all. So there's so much ground to cover that we just barely dipped our toes in, but we had to cut our time short as her area of California was due to have the power cut off due to weather conditions and fire hazards. So inevitably there will be a continuation of this conversation. But I begin this conversation by asking her what got her into all of this.
Well, I've got a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, and before that I was really interested in the true nature of reality, which to me seemed much more than what most people thought it was because of a series of maybe mystical events that occurred in my life. So I really was looking for more of a deeper meaning than a lot of people who might go into physics would be willing to accept. So for me, shut up and calculate isn't quite good enough. Not that we can necessarily know for sure what's going on, but I love the mystery, love the exploration of that.
Exactly. It's an interesting overlap between physics and the point of view that you're just talking about. Did you find that there were people that you were rubbing elbows with that felt the same way, or were they more shut up and calculate?
Well, when I went to school, there were some people like myself that were interested in quantum physics. That was a new thing, and that was the 1980s. So you might not think that was new, but it was still new. Still is new,
Absolutely.
strangely. Yeah. So there's that. In recent years, I've been connecting with colleagues, mentors, and friends that are people like physicist Fred Alan Wolf, physicist George Weissman, who I co-authored a paper with, physicist Henry Stapp, who is brilliant, and lots of other like-minded personalities and people who are very interested in consciousness. I've also become friends with physicist Manas Kafatos, and just a lot of big names that you might have seen or heard at some of the conferences. I know them quite well. I know most of them, most of those kind of folks, because we share a deep interest in finding out what is consciousness, what does it mean to have free will, how does free will and decisions that we make, how does that mind matter interface work. And again, we don't have all the answers, but it's definitely the place to explore.
And having an open mind is definitely the place to start.
Yes.
Yeah, so many stodgy sort of materialist scientists seems like they're sort of lacking that curiosity and open-mindedness. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have the wrong attitude, but it seems like you found a lot of like-minded people.
Well, for the most part, but even amongst those, we get inculcated in our mindset. So there's a collective consciousness that most of us are blind to. So much so that even someone like Henry Stapp, who's very open-minded, has had some difficulty appreciating the level of reality shifts and quantum jumps that I personally witness. So I do appreciate it's hard for people who have been raised with this whole expectation that we can be an objective observer to think for a second, maybe objectivity is not real. Maybe it never was. That was the paper that I was co-authoring with George Weissman. He and I share a fascination with meditation in the Tibetan kind of background. Yeah, so it has to do with I don't know if you know Tarthang Tulku, but he wrote books like Time, Space, and Knowledge. Yeah, they're awesome. So those books, when George and I found out, we shared that in common, and we understood and appreciated from a very deep intrinsic sense that things like psychokinesis are real. In fact, George went to Russia to train to become good at doing psychokinesis, and it's something that I've done in workshops with people as well. So with that level of shared background and interest, obviously, we were both noticing there's something else, that we can't assume that there's anything like objectivity. And in fact, here in 2019, that's what researchers are starting to show for sure is true. And that's such an exciting time to be alive.
Absolutely. And that reality in and of itself is collaborative.
Yes.
Yeah. So far, I mean, we get sort of indoctrinated to think that there's this objective reality that is untouchable and that there are, untenable laws of physics, and that's all. You just have to deal with that, and that's the reality that you are interacting with. But the fact that you can actually change that, you can work with it to manifest things and to sort of steer your life and your reality in whatever direction you like.
And that's where I like to go with it. Now, some people would be stopped right at the previous section and they're like, wait a minute, we didn't agree to that. And I know. But again, this is my experience, so you're exactly right.
Sure.
I do witness that things often go according to our thoughts, much more than we realize, and it's much more than coincidence. So I like to look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that when you were growing up, you had experiences that made you sort of realize that there were other things going on. What sorts of things did you experience?
Well, lots of things. I mean, I would notice that things would break down quite a bit in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Everything from cars, TV sets, you name it. And these are not TV sets like we have nowadays, where you just expect you buy it, it works. That was not the case in the 1960s.
Yes.
Kind of funny to think about it, but these were tubes TV sets, and there were tube testers at the grocery store, which again, a lot of people might not know what I am talking about, but you know.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was born in '66, so
Yeah, you know.
yes.
So anyway, what I would be able to do quite often is when things were broken, it was disruptive to the family. My father would often get upset. He was an engineer. These things were very disturbing, that the TV or the car is not working. What I noticed right from the start was that when I would meditate a lot as a child anyway. I should back up and say that. I would kind of zone out. I would be in a meditative state quite a lot, so much so that there were times my parents thought I might be autistic. They were looking into it because I was seriously like in another world. But that came in handy when things were breaking down, because I could just go into that state and then just it's hard to explain because I would just do it, but I would feel like, okay, this thing needs to work, the tube or whatever. Like my dad's tried 3 different tubes. Now he's starting to swear. I think, let's just make this last one he tried work. Let him try, And so I just kind of calmed down, get this feeling of love and feeling like the TV's working, and it would. And the same thing would happen when the car would not start. Again, it sounds weird, but cars didn't always start. And that was sort of normal. We would not allow those things to happen nowadays. We'd say, what kind of car is this? But that's pretty frequent occurrence. So I got a lot of practice due to glitchy technology in the 60s. But I didn't think of it as anything unusual. I didn't really talk about it much. It was sort of an inner world, because those times I tried to share what I thought were easy examples everyone could do, like working with weather, like rain starting and stopping, then it doesn't work when I showed my mom. So I learned, don't talk about it. Maybe we shouldn't even be doing this. I got a feeling like this is something where it's taboo or something, like we're not
Sure.
supposed to be doing it.
Yeah.
But
Because it's hard to reproduce,
right.
it becomes just outside of the realm of quantifiable. Like, and that's where you can't bring that stuff into a laboratory. It just, like you say, you even have a hard time explaining it, although you seem very adept at doing it. It's just not something that science can wrap their little minds around, I think. So I like where you're coming from, that you are interested in consciousness and collaborating with reality and changing it, and that you have the scientific background too. So do you think that quantum physics allows for all of that? I mean, is there enough room in quantum physics to accompany or to accommodate all of that?
I think they're naturally within nature, definitely. And then how we tend to view quantum physics, sometimes that can be limited. And then if we put so many constraints on it, like and say like we only do calculations with quantum physics, you can't assume this other stuff. You can't assume that consciousness can change it. Well, that's the whitewashed version of reality. That's not what the top secret government programs, I'm sure must exist. They're going to need to work with that stuff. So they have thought controlled light switches and that kind of thing. So obviously there are places in our governments where this is not off, it's not taboo science, but obviously for the mainstream, it doesn't exist and we're not supposed to
Yes,
know about it, but
exactly.
it does exist. So
Yeah, you only hear about it in tabloids or those sort of trashy programs on cable TV that are, hey, they're sensationalized and kind of wacky and kind of very fringe, purposely fringe. Like they're supposedly tackling these subjects, but it's done in sort of a not very serious way. Kind of
well, I
a
think they want people to laugh about it, to make fun of it, so that they can dismiss it and go back to their consumerism. Because what we're really talking about here is waking people up to being much more conscious, much more self aware. That's where this really goes. And that runs just the opposite direction from what most of our mainstream media and government and powers that be would wish for us. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying that most people don't find that helpful to keep the population placated and happy. They don't think that free will and having them start changing the world would necessarily be a good thing.
yes, exactly. It might lead to mass happiness, and then what would we need their institutions for?
Right.
Yeah. I love it. I love that. So when did you start calling it quantum jumping? When did you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, okay, let me back up because in the 1990s is when I had a Kundalini awakening. And so that's when I could no longer ignore this phenomenon that was in the back burner in my life for so long. I mean, it would be useful for me, but I wouldn't say anything. But then in the 1990s, when I had a Kundalini experience, that's really the moment that everything changed for me because
Mhm.
it was becoming impossible to ignore that there are some really epic scale shifts in reality going on. And obviously it's not just me, and I could feel that I needed to come forward. But it took about 5 years to integrate the experience I had with the ability to step forward and say something about it.
Sure.
So that was the gap between 1994 and the late 1990s. So that in the late 1990s, I thought, okay, what is this called that I'm really experiencing? Where I think everybody notices that you run a load of laundry and you might lose socks in the washing and drying machine, don't know what happened to them.
Hmm.
So we might call it a reality shift. This is before the internet as we know it. So I couldn't really do searches. I had access to the ARPANET a little bit through the university connection, but I couldn't really tell what was going on out there. And I didn't know that already PMH Atwater, an author, had already used the term reality shifts very much the same way that I was thinking about it. So I started talking about reality shifts, but then your question has to do with quantum jumping, would have loved to have started saying that early on, but one of the first mentors I met was Dr. Larry Dossey. He came out to Berkeley, where I live, and gave a talk, and I spoke to him, showed him the manuscript for reality shifts, and he said, whatever you do, Cynthia, please, please, please do not use that word quantum when you put the book title together. And I didn't really, I said working title, maybe reality shifts. He said, this is good. Please don't call it quantum. I don't think he knew that what an effect that had on me because I looked up to him so much. But I got to a point eventually where I realized I need to use this term quantum jumps. I'm going to have to tell Larry, Larry, guess what? I'm going to bring this book out. I know you don't want me to call it that. And he said, I said that? Oh, I'm sorry. This is great. So it's very funny. But I think it was good I held back, because there is a whole lot. What his point was, there's just so much stuff out there right now. The quantum this, quantum that. It's
Sure.
almost meaningless. He didn't want that happening to something so important.
Yeah, totally
Yeah.
makes sense. So what is the difference between classical and quantum reality?
Okay, well, to me, they go together. A lot of people see it that there's a boundary, and that's the common view amongst pretty much everybody, scientists included, with the exception of my favorite physicists, who are looking at the theory of everything and how do you put it together. But otherwise, people really hate to put it together. It's like, oh no, let's not do that. They're separate. Okay, so what's people, when they think of science and physics from school, usually when you take a physics class, if they had one, then you would remember it's things like gravity, usually working with an inclined plane with some degree of friction, or they might make it frictionless. So it's very simple matter of the angle involved and the mass involved and so forth. So you've got equations like force equals mass times acceleration, very much the kind of things you can measure with your senses, with your eyes, nose, fingers, everything you can know for sure. It's like right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's classical physics. It has to do with the things that are viewable in our regular life for the most part. But then when you get into looking at light, that's the moment that it all changes. And light is in all of our lives as well. That is a quantum phenomena. Light, a single photon, is a quantum particle. So the moment you're looking at light, you're in that so-called quantum realm. And of course we're looking at light. It's a part of our lives. So, but that's where the weirdness begins. That's what people would rather not look at. Like, don't look at the light behind the curtain.
Sure.
It's going to be some weirdness there. And it shows that things are much more connected than classical physics would have us believe. And all of the assumptions that our Western science was built on, or 5 of the big ones, start collapsing. And that's, again, very awkward for classical physics. So they would rather not look at that. Like
Yeah.
this whole thing of objectivity, for example. Yeah.
So quantum physics, it runs right along the same line of thought as, say, the Buddhist concept of interconnectedness. Like everything is connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. So
Mm-hmm.
this, now some people think that both are hooey, because they say, well, if everything's connected, and that means I am God and you're God, and that's meaningless. But I think what we need to keep in mind is there are still levels of identity. So,
Yeah.
and that's, I think when you bring that idea in, then it's, hopefully people can stay open-minded and not just shut the whole thing out.
Mm-hmm. So what is I'm going to bring up questions that I have a hard time wrapping my mind around, and what better time to try and tackle it than when I have a physicist in front of me. But what does superposition mean? I know that's an important concept in all of this.
Yes, and I'll use the example of Schrodinger's cat, because that was the famous example that Erwin Schrödinger brought forth to demonstrate one of these principles of quantum physics that on the face of it looks quite absurd. So I'll describe the experiment, and then I'll talk about what we're getting at here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the reason for the experiment, I'll touch on it briefly, and we'll come back to it, because I know it
Okay.
doesn't make a lot of sense. It's the idea, superposition of states in the quantum realm, that when you have something like a particle, and that would be an electron, for example, and an electron is, you think of it as zooming around the nucleus of an atom. And if as it's zooming around, it's in a blur, because we don't necessarily know where it is exactly. So it's kind of everywhere at once. And so that's why we have things called wave functions to describe quantum physics, because you can't pin it down precisely. So that's the whole idea there. So back to the experiment. So the superposition of states thing struck Erwin Schrödinger as very bizarre, because he said, well, let me just do this. We'll test this whole theory and show where this ludicrous conclusion that it goes to. If you have, for example, an experimental box in which you put a live cat, and this is a living cat, just a regular, like a house cat, and in the cat box, there is also a vial of poison, a poison gas that could be released randomly. And the randomness of it is decided by the radioactive decay, radiation and radioactive decay being a quantum process. So at some quantum moment, which is unknown, then the little quantum trigger device goes off, the poison breaks loose into the room that the box the cat is in, and that is enough of a dose to kill the cat. Okay, so here's the big conundrum. If we don't look inside the box, it's closed, there's no window, and we don't therefore know whether the cat at any given moment is still alive or if it's dead, because we don't know if that random device, that quantum device, has triggered the poison to go off. And that's not the weird part. The weird part is that quantum physics then, this is where it gets really weird. Quantum physics says, no worries, that cat is in a superposition of states. It's both alive and dead because it's in the hands of that quantum device right now. And that is where, that was the whole point of this example that Erwin Schrödinger was making, just to say, this is sounding kind of crazy. And it does.
So a superposition is something that can be multiple things at the same time.
Right.
Okay.
And now it's being understood by a majority of scientists, physicists, that is, that you and I and everyone and everything exist in a superposition of states, that it's not simply that quantum realm. So we're getting to a tipping point, at least within the community of physicists, that those that go to conferences and stay current on things are recognizing, just by looking at the experimental evidence, that this is definitely true. That crazy Schrödinger's cat experiment is true, and we're all living in that superposition of states, which I think is a good thing. I think it's the way nature works. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Instead of, it completely takes us out of the world that we've been inundated to view as just basically binary, either this or that.
Yes.
It's not only this or that, but it can be a combination of all those things and many more thises or that's. I like it.
A lot more possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And more chances and ways to co-collaborate with all of this.
Yes.
Yeah, consciously. So how
Yes.
does one, speaking of quantum jumping, how does one go or attempt to go about doing this consciously?
Okay, well, I think that's a good question, because usually what I'm noticing is most people definitely do this, but they're doing it subconsciously without noticing that they're getting involved in it at all. So our subconscious still drives the show. And when we think of ourselves as a one entity, that works best for meditators, actually, because they are most aligned with their head, their heart, their gut. And if people are not aligned with those three things, what can happen? It's like anytime you see a mother and two children and the kids are pulling different directions and the mother wants to go somewhere else, it's just chaos. So to get the kind of alignment that we need, it does help to meditate. So you start recognizing that what you need is what you love, is what you want. And so it's a spiritual process, actually. So I just want people to understand that that's super important, because if you don't acknowledge what you actually need, and you think, well, I'm just going to go after what I want, never mind what I really love or what I actually need, I'm just going to focus on what I want. Might be possible to get part of that, but it's very disappointing, and ultimately it's sort of a disaster. So when I talk about quantum jumping, it needs to start with basically meditation to get into that zone where you're not doing something that's counter to what you are really all about. And that's disappointing for a lot of people. So I just want to put that out there. So I don't think it's disappointing for you in particular. I'm not talking about you, but I get so many emails from people that just want to change something that happened in the past. They say, I made a big mistake. I just want to go back in time, fix it. Can I do that? Can that be done? And the short answer is yes, that can be done. But it takes, well, let's talk about what it takes, because it takes detachment. You have to, first you need to be able to accept things as they are, ideally. And a lot of people have trouble with that. The whole reason they wrote to me in the first place is because this horrible thing that they're very upset about happened, that they really wish they could go back and take it all back. That's great. And I'm sure they can. But what the people who are most successful at quantum jumping, the ones who really most frequently see history has just changed, what they're able to do is love things the way they are, be in a state of acceptance, and really, and even love the past, even the so-called disaster. there's something magic that happens in that. And it has to do with the reintegration of oneself and just feeling this huge surge of energy that comes through. So that then when you're re-envisioning what is possible, it's a very natural progress to make that quantum jump to completely different reality. At the same time as still loving the so-called disaster that you're leaving behind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Wouldn't part of that involve being present in the way of, say, if you, let's say what you regret doing to somebody was out of anger. So what you can do in the present would be to work on the cycle of whatever got you into that state of anger, your short temper or your irritability or whatever, and try not to replicate that in the present, along with simultaneously realizing that, okay, I made that mistake in the past. I don't have to replicate it, but also I can embrace it as just a stepping stone to get me where I am today. I mean, does that have
Yeah, that's
anything?
good. I
Okay.
think living in a state of grace and being free from things like guilt and
Hmm.
blame is really important, because if we're locked into all this weird agitation about the past, whether it's thinking that we feel like we should have done better or that we're blaming someone else, it's counterproductive entirely. Much harder to get the kind of quantum jumps I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And it kind of concretizes things too, right?
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. It locks in exactly that situation that a person is saying they really don't like. They're kind of, like I said, making it like fixed concrete.
And if you're going to beat yourself up about it, then you're more likely to set a lower standard for yourself and repeat the exact same thing that you're disappointed in yourself for doing in the first place.
Yeah, so it does help to ironically just detach a little bit, accept that your best is always good enough. And then don't judge yourself. Just keep doing your best. Like, what can I do right now? Well, then do it.
Sure.
And if it's too big for you, then leave that to the rest of the universe. Universe has got it. Yeah.
While we're talking about the past, what is the how does retrocausality fit into all this?
Well, retrocausality is an intrinsic part of quantum physics. It's built right in. So we can't dismiss or deny it, although it's not talked about very much because there's so much about quantum physics. It's like we keep that in the closet. Then that's another part we stick in the closet. But the truth is, we can't leave it alone. We can't pretend it's not happening, because the future absolutely is able to influence the present. And there have been some experiments done to conclusively prove that just in recent years. A lot of people could see that writing was on the wall already, and have been, in fact, because of the mathematics, been working to do experiments. Like physicist John Creamer has a transactional interpretation of quantum physics involving a kind of a handshake from the past to the future. And because the math is so perfect for it. And so therefore he's been working on an experimental device in Seattle, Washington, where he'll be able to observe a photon before he sends it.
Wow.
No results yet. It's frustrating, but that is not surprising, because with the level of equipment we have and the kind of noise that goes on, it's difficult to run an experiment like this.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's see. Would you say that the placebo effect also has a lot to do with all this too, and it comes up in the book of
Yes.
yours that I read. Would you say that it's more a result of quantum jumping or of the mind's own innate ability to heal itself? Is there jumping involved in that, or?
Well, to me, the mind's innate ability to heal itself is a quantum process. I view nature as being primarily quantum. I think quantum is the basis of everything, and I view classical physics to be a very special case subset. And again, I think we've got mathematical proof to show that, which is, again, not commonly known, but there are some physicists that have been able to derive all of classical physics, in fact, all of quantum physics, from just some very basic principles. But going back to your question, that was a good one. I'm sorry, got excited. Can you
Go for
restate
it.
that again? So the placebo, yeah, natural or quantum? Well, it's kind of both, because nature is quantum. And so when we think placebo, what's happening is that our body's natural ability? Absolutely. Remember, most of the time our subconscious is driving all of the quantum jumps that we're experiencing, a huge, vast number of them. So it's happening all the time that we're quantum jumping. We just don't notice it. So when we think, okay, I'm going to consciously quantum jump, that's when you really need to line things up, get your subconscious in line with what you actually love and what you really want. You need to be all of one piece, and then you can do that, and then amazing things can happen. So this is why I believe we're experiencing this Renaissance time, really, with the placebo, which originally means I shall please, and it was first scientifically studied around World War II, where the doctors in the field had run out of medicine to dispense. So all they had was salt water in a solution to give to these wounded soldiers, and doctors want to do their best, so they did that. And come to find out that's kind of working. And then in the 1960s and 70s, Madison Avenue told that was part of the marketing, to let people know we've run trials on our drugs that we're marketing, and they surpassed the placebo, which might be a sugar pill. So one control group of people get sugar pills, the other receive the actual medications, and then they either don't get the headache or whatever it is that the medicine's supposed to be doing. And what I mean by it, something astonishing has happened, is we've seen a doubling of the placebo effect just in the last couple of decades, where it used to be a 30% kind of a response. So a wounded soldier on the battlefield could get an injection of salt water and feel better. The pain went away. And now, if you did the same thing, 70% of those wounded soldiers would be benefiting in America. We're getting an American effect, which is interesting also. I don't know why it's so strong in America, but I think part of it might be just people practicing yoga, meditating, helping the collective consciousness in our continent make a kind of a quantum jump right there. Certainly looks possible to me, because we do have more people. We've passed the point of 10% of the population meditating in the United States of America, which is enormous. That's a huge thing, huge
Yeah.
milestone.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. When you talk about meditation, do you formally sit down on a cushion and do that, or do you just do it wherever you happen to be, whatever you're doing?
what Well, yeah, when I first tried to meditate, I was joining in with some group thing. It was kind of funny because it was one of those close your eyes, lie down and listen. And I would do that, and then I'd wake up and what happened? What did I miss? So I realized quickly, like, that's not working so well, or maybe I'm sleep deprived. But actually, meditation is pretty easy. All you have to do is combine a favorite activity that relaxes you. Could be washing the dishes, looking out the kitchen window, and just doing something calm, soothing like that. So it's just a nice, if you like that activity, could be going on a nature walk, walking past trees. And as you're walking, just paying attention to your breathing, or just paying attention to your breathing, just any activity like that, combined with any kind of focus of thought. And that is meditation. So it's not just going om and doing the little hand mudras and breathing in through one nostril and out through the other. That could work. Not putting it down, but there's so many different kinds of meditation. You can have a mantra. You could be drumming, whatever you find. So personally, I've got about 10 or 12 meditations I love, and depends on what I'm doing as to which one I go to. And some are much faster than others, but whatever. So it's kind of like what you need for the time and the moment. And I think a lot of people are experimenting with these right now too. So
Yeah,
that's good.
absolutely. Absolutely. But there are some meditations where the idea is to silence your mind, and just either that or to, you know, let your thoughts or feelings or whatever that comes up just sort of, drift by you without attaching to them. But you also talk about during meditation that you use that time to visualize. Like if you want something uh, to happen, like, I don't know, a situation that you would like to happen, or some money that you would like to come into, or something like that, you suggest visualizing that yourself in the future as if you have already attained whatever it is that you're wanting, and feeling what that feels like and the gratitude that comes with that, right?
Right. And this is for people that can visualize. Some people have trouble with it, but yes. So remember the steps of quantum jumping. First, you want to make sure that you're in alignment with yourself, kind of feel that sort of relaxed state of beingness. And then you want to detach. Because if you're very attached to your circumstance, it's almost impossible to visualize something different. So you want to be able to get to that kind of happy, groovy in between. You're the waveform. You're everywhere. You're just blissed out. You are joy. And then when you lock onto something like, okay, here's the situation that I'd love to see be, you're right, having a sense of that it's a done deal, feeling like this is in the future, this is happening, and feeling the gratitude for it, recognizing that when you're in that sort of blissed out, detached state, you're very outside of time, as it were. You're transcending time, so you can absolutely access the future and get memories from there and feelings from there, and bring the joy of that experience back to you right now. So now you're on kind of like on rails. You're going straight to that future. You're there. So it's a simple matter to move forward accordingly.
We have been speaking of past and future and present, and we're used to seeing time as like on a linear sort of timeline, a linear sort of path. But you don't think that that's the case at all, right? You don't even like to use the term timeline. Timeline.
Yeah, I don't tend to use it. Right. I've seen so many strange anomalies with time, and some of them are well known in some cultures. Like in Norwegian, they have a word, "vardiger," which means to see the evidence of someone before they arrive. And that's happened to me. I heard it was a nice day. The front door was slightly ajar. I was expecting my daughter and her friends, and I'm in the kitchen doing something. And I heard the footsteps on the porch. I heard the voices of my daughter and her friends, very unmistakable, not something else. I'm not confused. I know what I heard. I say this because when I went, I think I shouted to them, "Come on in, the door's open." And then it was silent. And I thought, well, that's just so weird. Where are they? Are they playing some game or did they leave? So I went to the door, looked around. They were not there. And they didn't arrive for another like 15, 20 minutes. And then I asked, did you come and then leave again? No. This is just a simple Norwegian experience of Vardieger. And it's not just the Norwegians. It's known in other cultures as well. So there is kind of sometimes a little bit of a precognition, if you will, or a deja vu, but that was so real. I could actually hear the voices, and it was quite extraordinary. So
Wow.
there's something definitely, some people could still say that's a timeline, but to me, time is not a linear thing. I've seen it slow down. I've seen it almost stop completely. So when it does things like that, it's hard for me to, in full respect and honor of it, call it just a timeline. Time is doing too many extraordinary things.
Um, in regards to what has been called spooky action at a distance,
Yes.
would you say that that was the concept of distance? Wait, let me start that over again. That's why I wrote some of these questions down, because they're kind of tricky, and I want to make sure that I ask them right. In regards to spooky action at a distance, is it the concept of distance that's the illusion, or the concept of separateness?
Hmm. That's a good question. Meaning, it might be both. Go to the quantum, because we tend to think in our classical Boolean logic it's one or the other, of yes or no, black or white. I think it could very well be both, because when it comes to something like spooky action at a distance, this is where you can get into things like the response of prayer and the fact that there can be intercessory prayer. It's one of the things I love about Dr. Larry Dossey's books, is he writes a lot about that, and was one of the first places I read about these. They're extraordinary. So it means that we can have a big effect, a big positive effect for someone we love, even though we're not there. And that does transcend, both the time and the space. It means we're together in a way. Don't remember your exact wording there, but it's sort of indicative that everything might be going on. This is
Mhm.
a big process that's kind of not yet fully understood. It's something. It gets into this idea of entanglement, and we hear a lot about that word now, thanks to quantum computing, and the idea that processing power in a quantum computer will come from entangled qubits. These are these little bits that are doing the functioning and processing for the computer system. They need to be entangled so they can operate together. And then you might be able to entangle a whole qubit system within one computer with another computer, for example. So networking will start being very different. We haven't hit that point yet that I know of. At least it's not reported yet. Again, we've got government stuff that's going a little deeper than what we read about.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think that's conspiracy theory. I think that's just fact.
No, this is cutting edge
Yeah,
science. This is
yeah,
just pure science.
absolutely. I think that the fact that the government is further ahead in technology than they let on is, I think that's a very real thing, you know?
It is. It's in the interest of national security. So, of
Absolutely.
course, yes.
That's what they say, at least. So, what are the
Maybe
differences?
other things.
Yes, exactly. What are the differences in dynamic between a mass quantum jump and a personal quantum jump? Like,
Right.
like a mass one would be a Mandela effect, for instance.
Yes, it would be an intentional Mandela effect. It would be and we haven't yet seen anything like that, although this might change. I'll be participating in the first really large scale Mandela Effect conference in the world, which will be in Ketchum, Idaho, beginning of November 2019. So it'll be videotaped, so people that miss it can hopefully see everything on the videos. I'm
Cool.
pretty sure we'll be doing some experiments of this nature because we have an opportunity to take a look at some of the biggest problems facing the world. And as a group, you can change the things.
Mhm.
So this is along the lines of prayer, but without borders and without trying to press any agenda. So I think it would always work best, again, with integrity, which integrity means lining things up. So it only works if you're genuinely wishing for the best for all concerned. Anything short of that will never work very well, in my opinion.
The
So
thing, I'm just going to assume that the listeners know what the Mandela effect is, so we don't have to go into explaining it right now. But the thing that makes me scratch my head the most about that is why? Why would, because they don't seem to be things that have, well, okay, the Mandela situation in and of itself has some import, but things like the changed line in the Snow White movie or different Bible quotations, they just seem to be so minuscule. It makes me wonder what is the what is the intention behind that? Or is there any intention? Like, is it just a matter of, I don't know. I have no idea what angle to even approach that.
yes. Well, there's a movie that's coming out that'll be out in December. I haven't seen it, but a friend of mine went, and it's called The Mandela Effect. So that's a great way for people to, if they want to know what is this, you can see the movie, be viewable on demand December 6th, and also in a lot of independent movie theaters. So I haven't seen it, so I don't know what it says, but it does present some examples of this Mandela Effect. And then to answer your question, I would say that there is absolutely something deeper going on. And probably the movie doesn't get into that because I think it's a sci-fi thriller. So
Mhm.
it won't probably. But I will tell you that there definitely is a pattern to a lot of these things. And you can see it in your own life and hopefully find a spiritual path and an awakening of sorts as you recognize. To me, it feels like being asked, wake up within this dream that you've been sleeping, even though you thought you were awake. And I touch on that in my book, Reality Shifts, a little bit, that you can live life just like you can wake up inside a dream and have a lucid dream. You can start living lucidly by looking more deeply at a lot of the meaning for some of these changes that are occurring. And we'll be seeing that at the conference. We have an artist coming to do a show, and that's Kimberly Lynn Hansen. And I don't want to reveal too much about it. I only know a little bit about what she'll be doing, but it's totally on the same path that there's a huge message that we can start seeing. Everything's connected, and it's good. It's all very good.
I
And it's
love
a
it.
big time for waking up. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Cool. Speaking of dreams, I heard you say in an interview that dreams are the real reality. What did you mean
Yes.
by that?
Well, okay. So we talked a little bit about the Mandela effect. A lot of the theories as to what's going on, you might have heard of the simulation theory, which Elon Musk is a fan of, and I guess the physicist uh, Campbell is also, that did My Big Toe. He writes about that. Tom Campbell, he's also a proponent of that. So that's one. I've for many years been going into detail about the quantum macroscopic scale quantum phenomena. That's to me makes a lot of sense. We've got evidence that this is happening. So I've been bringing up that angle. But all these different theories are basically when you go down far enough, like a simulation of what? What are we simulating? What's the real thing? You're going to end up at the same place. You have to end up at consciousness. And so that is what I mean when I say that the world is like a dream. It is that consciousness is running the show, creating everything. On my Living the Quantum Dream podcast, I've interviewed Donald Hoffman, and he writes about the way he's a specialist in the field of vision. And what he describes is that everything we think we see, and we trust our senses, right? This gets back to our conversation about classical physics, that what we can touch, what we can see, what we can measure, that's got to be real. What Donald Hoffman points out is that there's a huge translation that occurs between the time those photons of light hit the retina, go through our nervous system, finally go to our brain. By the time they do that, what we think is so real that we're absolutely certain that that is out there, it's not. It's just a complete mapping and translation, which is very similar to just looking at your computer screen. And if you want to put something in the trash, you put it in the trash icon and it gets thrown away. So we're doing that with our mind all the time. So again, very dreamlike. And it doesn't really matter which of the interpretations you're using for the Mandela effect. It all goes back to consciousness, in my opinion, except for the false memory syndrome. Well, even then they're saying our consciousness is screwy. We have faulty memory, and that's what's going on. Again, consciousness. So all the roads go there. I think that's a clue too.
Well, and they could just be different memories. I mean, it's been proven that many people, or at least more than one person, can witness the same event and come out with a completely different report.
Yes, and I love that because this was experimentally proven in a quantum physics experiment this year. It's exciting because that was the first experimental proof I've ever seen that shows that two observers in the same time, same place, looking at the same thing, saw two different things. Both viewers are considered completely trustworthy. They're part of the same experimental apparatus, and the two observers are saying two different things. Spot on, yes. So I'm just so excited I'm living to see this, because it's just showing like, yes, this is what the meditators have been talking about, the Buddhists, the great mystics of through all time, the great seers, the wise ones. They knew this. And finally, we're getting some experimental confirmation. Yay.
And it seems like it makes so much room for so much possibility. I mean, when you realize what sort of terrain we're navigating, like who knows where this is going to go? I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing, like everything is up for grabs.
I personally love it. I know it's challenging to people that would prefer there to be one correct reality and one big T truth with a capital T.
Hmm.
So it's frustrating for some people, and it can be scary. So I do see that. But for those of us who are on a spiritual path already, it's not frustrating. It's exciting. So yeah, I
Absolutely.
agree with you.
And it seems like maybe what most people are disconcerted by is that, sure, things can pop into reality or we may want to manifest them, but them popping out like seemingly randomly, I think is what freaks a lot of people out.
Yeah, you got to learn to roll with it. Just the other day, I was looking in my book, Quantum Jumps. This one, I'm looking. I was physically holding the book because I'd already spent 2 hours looking through the electronic form of it for a part of the book that I know I wrote that is no longer in that book. And
Whoa.
then I thought, well, it's got to be in the printed copy. I know where it should be. So I wrote this book. I'm going through it like it's gone. So, and it's okay, but I have to. Then I think, okay, you just wasted 3 hours on this crazy wild goose chase, but it's okay. I think the point is just loosen up, lighten up, don't worry. So it's not in the book anymore. Oh well, that.
So let's do the version of it. What's the missing part of the book right now? What were you trying to find? Do you remember the
Oh
exact?
yeah. Well, it's so frustrating because when this happens, then it's like I don't know for sure which part of the book it was in. I thought
Uh-huh.
it was early on. I've got an illustration. In fact, it's similar to the cover. You can see
Hmm.
this little character jumping, and if you open the whole book, jumping through a wormhole. I thought
Yes.
I'd explained all this in great detail about how, and here's the illustration. This is on page, what is this page number? Looks like page 40, and you can
Hmm.
see this black and white. Hold it up,
Yeah.
hopefully. There it
Uh-huh.
is. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that's again showing this multiverse, holographic multiverse model where our little hero is jumping through basically a wormhole from one reality to another. And I thought that I'd made the very clear connection between the EPR bridge and quantum tunneling and all that. And I just don't see that in here at all. It's mind blowing. So
That's
where
crazy.
did it go? I don't know. It's okay. It's fine.
Sure.
It's fine with me.
Yeah. I was going to liken the quantum handshake to sort of constructing a wormhole, kind of. Would that
Yes.
be? Yeah.
I like that. Yes. I think that's a good way to look at it for us, because we're talking about these quantum jumps, these reality shifts. For someone like John Kramer, the guy who created the transactional interpretation, he's I have interviewed him. I don't know what he'd say, but probably he'd want to keep it like, well, we don't need to go there. And so like, okay, we don't need to go there, but some of us do.
Getting nervous, getting nervous.
Some of us do need to go there.
Absolutely. Why not?
Because we're
Jeez.
witnessing some pretty cool stuff and looking
Absolutely.
for answers. Yes.
Did you ever see the movie Donnie Darko?
I haven't seen that one. With
Oh,
the title, it says Darko, and I'm like, oh boy, do I want to go
oh
there?
no, it's
But
well,
it's good.
it's
Okay, I'll check it out.
it's funny too, but it's about time travel. It's about creating a wormhole, and it's so perplexing. It's not, I mean, there's a dark aspect to it, but once you see it in the bigger picture, it's not like that at all. It's more like um, just that feeling that you get when you encounter something that you're not familiar with. So sometimes people
Yes.
react to that by being scared or being feeling threatened or something like that.
Well,
But
I'm glad, so glad you brought that up, because this reminds me of what you said earlier, that
mhm,
like, why are these Mandela effects so seemingly like meaningless
mhm.
almost? I think that's why. I think that's exactly why. It has to do with things that don't matter much, because you don't want the mass populace to be terrified when
Yeah,
we're
sure.
waking up. Like, what is going on? We don't want it to be horrifying and
Yeah.
like terrifying. We want it to be like, well, that sort of doesn't matter much. Like for me, it's like, okay, the whole section that I know was in this book is now missing, but I can deal with that. It's like, well, maybe I wanted to redo it or do it better. Fine. Okay. No big deal.
And if there are multiple versions of reality, then in some reality, that version of the book still exists.
Absolutely. I'm sure
Yeah.
it does.
In
Yeah.
another version, there's 5 volumes, and you're working on the sixth.
Yes.
Are you working on any books right now?
I started one, but this
Mhm.
conference has really got my full attention. So it's been such a treat to work with other people, such as one of the other people who's coming is Christopher Anatra, and he is a CEO of a company, NECS. So it's extraordinary that a CEO of a company would step forward and say, the Mandela effect is real. It's affecting my customers. And in fact, he had this, he writes software for all of the delivery trucks that take food around the United States, maybe into Canada. I don't know how far it goes. But anyway, he was basically addressing the importance of this phenomenon, that some of the foods themselves are changing. Like, I live in California. We always called it a Haas avocado because it was HAAS, but now it's never been that, and it's only ever been HASS, which I would pronounce Hass.
Haas, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Hass, yeah. Which that I would never call it Haas, but we always
Uh-huh.
called it Haas, Haas
Sure.
avocado. But anyway, so yeah, he'll be presenting at the conference as well, and it's extraordinary to be there with him. With Lauren Cannell Pavelka will be there. She has a book, The Mandela Effect or the Miracle Effect: Why I Am the Wolf and You Are Too, and she comes at it from a very uh, well, it's very experiential situation where she was diagnosed with all sorts of things by the Mayo Clinic. They couldn't figure out what she was dealing with, but it looked like it was a genetic problem.
Mhm.
So she's been doing some real miracle healing, very much along the lines of what we're talking about. And then Shane Robinson also comes from a similar background to Lauren's, with a lot of his mother was a minister. So both Lauren and Shane are coming from a very deeply imbued of spirituality in the Christian tradition, and recognizing big changes in the Bible and being able to bring that forth to people in a way that doesn't, again, panic them completely. Like, my Bible is changing. What's going on? Are
Sure.
we in the end times? Like, no, it's not like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking about, talking about all this quantum jumping and how reality is co-collaborative. I was thinking about the place of art in the world. And art, some people use art, and that could be music, paintings, whatever, to report on some of the troubled things in the world, or some situations that are hard to look at, or maybe they want to raise awareness about. Um, and whether that in some strange way maybe perpetuates things, or maybe art would be better off envisioning a future that is better, that's evolved.
Not sure my preference, but I like to choose optimism. I like to go that direction of how good can it get, because I know the power of imagination. I know firsthand that what I allow my imagination to go into, I'm basically invoking it, inviting it, summoning it in. So to the degree that we turn our focus of attention in a downward direction, I know a lot of people feel a need to process things. So I'm not putting that down, and I'm not saying shouldn't happen. And who am I to say what an artist should create? But if you ever have a choice, and if you ever don't know, if you're flipping that random coin, please go in the positive direction. Challenge yourself to ask how good it can get, even if it does seem dark, even if it does seem bad. Ask how good that can get.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Just go in a better direction.
Exactly. What the hell do you have to lose?
Yes.
Yeah, why not? Um, why don't you tell the listeners where they can find you online to maybe, find out more about what you're talking about, maybe get your books or see where you're appearing or...
Yes. Well, my main way to reach me is through my website, which is realityshifters.com. It's very inclusive. It's all of us. We're all doing this. And I'm on YouTube under my name, Cynthia Sue Larson. I'm on Facebook under Cynthia Sue Larson, Twitter, Cynthia Sue Larson. So those are the most active places that I am. I've got a podcast called Living the Quantum Dream, which is part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network. And I like to interview scientists, luminaries, people who are very involved in this whole idea of consciousness and quantum physics, my two favorite subjects to bring together.
Absolutely. In my in my fold of the quantum realm, for some reason, I'm having a really hard time tracking down where to actually access your podcast. Where is it?
Oh, well, it's on the radio station in Boston, but you should be able to find it. Dream Vision 7 Radio Network.
Oh,
You can
okay.
type in, it has a page on Facebook too.
Oh,
So
okay.
maybe if you're on Facebook, just go to Living the Quantum Dream with Cynthia Sue Larson, and then
Gotcha.
there'll be a link through. That's funny. I would not want it to be that hard to find.
Well, I think maybe I was assuming that I could get to it through your website, but
I
maybe.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an on again, off again thing. It's sort of when I can do an episode a month, then I'm
Mhm.
doing that. Otherwise, they're in reruns, but they're all fascinating. They're
Cool.
timeless. So I highly
Nice.
recommend every show.
And they're archived so people can...
Yes, they're
Okay,
all archived. You can find
fantastic.
them, and they're
Well,
awesome.
so other people won't have that problem, I will put the link in the show notes. So
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
yes, absolutely. And I will also put the link to the conference and to your website. So yeah,
Thank you so much. It's been
absolutely.
such a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise. Yeah, let's definitely do it again.
Let's do it. I'd
Yes,
love
I
to.
have a page and a half more questions to tackle. So I'm sure
Excellent.
by the time we talk again, I will have even more. So thank you so much for your time. And I hope that the power outage goes okay. I hope it doesn't cause too much of a stir.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I
Yes.
hope so too. How
Yes.
good can it get?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have a good rest of your evening, Cynthia.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Take care.
Bye for now.
Oh, man. I was blown away by that conversation. It was highly enjoyable, and I can't wait to have more of them. As I said, I have a lot more questions that I have yet to ask, and I'm sure by the time that we have a chance to cross paths again, I will have many more. This is subject matter and terrain that deserves a lot of exploration. I mean, it really can be taken many, many ways. When you view reality in this sense, I mean, really anything is possible. When you realize how fluidic reality is, and how much responsibility that the person who participates in that has, and the perceiver of that, and when the templates that they may or may not lay upon whatever it is that they're experiencing or seeing or hearing or whatever, it really casts things in a completely different context. And I find it absolutely thrilling, stimulating to learn of this way of looking at things that really puts a lot of responsibility on the perceiver. No same shit, different day mindset is going to last in a reality such as this. I mean, in a sense, that's a perfect example of why most people are kept in the hamster wheel of their mundane everyday lives, is because they assume that it's going to be the same thing every day. So they lower their expectations, and usually those lowered expectations are met with the same shit every day. So it's really exciting to be able to comprehend a reality where we have everything to do with it. And once more people realize that and understand that and begin to practice that, I think we will understand that that was the situation all along. Mind definitely affects matter. Mind affects mind. Heart affects heart. Everything affects everything. There's no division between us. And I think that we are headed slowly but surely in that direction. And Cynthia Sue Larson is a great person to combine the world of science, especially a very sort of experimental part of science, quantum physics, and the exploration and expansion of consciousness, mixed with curiosity and an immense open mind. I think that's a perfect combination. So I really got a lot out of that conversation, and hopefully you listeners did too. So if you would like to help to keep this show going and help me to sort of broaden the horizons of this particular reality called The Melt, you can go to my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/themeltpodcast. And you can go there and contribute as little as $1 a month. And that will just be automatically taken out of your bank account, or I believe you can do it through PayPal too. I'm not 100% sure. And that will be money coming in that will go towards making this podcast even better. It could use a lot of improvement, but the subject matter is not one of the things that needs improving. It's more the production and my ability to go places and interview even more people and have be able to document firsthand experiences and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in doing that, I highly recommend it, and I would be so grateful if you would. And at the very least, if you could just spread the word, that would be fantastic. And now, as I have said, the Melt has a website. We finally have a home on the internet, www.themeltpodcast.com. There you will find all of the episodes. I sometime, hopefully in the near future, want to establish a forum there, or at least places where you can comment on the individual episodes and start conversations with fellow listeners, and I will be jumping into, obviously. So I highly recommend you go there. I also have a Facebook page, The Melt Podcast. And there's 2 Melt podcasts, actually, but I think it will be obvious which one is mine. Just look for the logo and the subject matter, and you cannot go wrong. And you can subscribe to The Melt on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other popular places that I am probably forgetting to mention. Thank you, dear listeners, so much for lending an ear. I hope that you were able to glean something out of this, and maybe it widened your worldview just a little bit. Maybe it just reaffirmed things that you already suspected or knew from firsthand experience. Something that I would like to do with this show, too, is not only talk to people who study these things and write books and research them, but also people who have had firsthand experiences with these things. I think that firsthand experience is something that is undervalued in this world of things needing to be measured and quantified in a laboratory setting, since we are under the under the what am I trying to, what word am I looking for? The umbrella, the mindset of scientism, the new religion, which insists that it's not a religion and even goes out of its way to put down religion or to make it some sort of antiquated notion. First-hand experience is very important. And there are things that just can never be replicated in a laboratory, maybe never replicated again. I think there are many experiences that are one of a kind. They happen for a particular reason, in a particular context, with a particular person or group of people. And those shouldn't be discounted. So I'm all about that. And again, I will ask you and invite you to send your own recorded stories of your own experiences. No particular subject matter, anything that is numinous, anything that is outside of the realm of consensus reality. I want to hear about it. And, excuse me, if it falls into a show that we're doing, I will put that at the intro before whoever it is that I'm talking to. So, yes, you can send those to themeltpodcast@gmail.com and, just put attention story or something. I don't know. Put whatever you want. It's not like I only select certain emails to read. So those are highly welcome also. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And please spread the word on your social media platform of choice. You're much appreciated. Spread the word. And until next month, please take care.